Good evening, everyone. This is a special bonus episode of Talking Till Dawn. These episodes are ones that we normally record for just our patrons, but we thought it would be fun to also release this one publicly so that you could hear what we normally do on our Patreon.
The sort of guff we usually talk over on Patreon.
Yeah, so as you can tell, this doesn't work the way the full episodes normally do. Normally it's very well researched and very well structured. This is just us shooting the shit about some macabre or spooky topic for however long it takes, and we hope you enjoy it. I'm not really selling the Patreon, am I?
We'll see.
So, on the 25th of June this year, that's 2021 for anyone who's listening to this in the future, there was an important document that was released to the public. Now, this was released by the Pentagon, and it is about unidentified aerial phenomena. In fact, the document itself is labelled Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. And it was collated, put together in the aftermath of a bill that was put forward, I believe, in the Senate, where it was COVID relief was being passed. But what happens in the American system, and I'm sure our American colleagues will correct me if this is wrong, but quite often they make amendments to different bills that go through.
Yeah.
And they add different, sometimes completely unrelated policies onto a larger policy or framework. So what happened was people put this amendment onto this bill which said, oh, by the way, as well as all this help for COVID, please also release everything you know about UFOs.
Yeah. In return for us agreeing to ratify this, we want you to add this other thing that's unrelated onto the bill. It was kind of like that sort of thing, I guess. Yeah.
So this is the preliminary report on that. I believe this is 9 pages long, and I believe there's a 90-page version of this which we may never see. That's because in this report it's everything, and I should stress this, it's only what the Navy knows. I know people talk about, it's the Pentagon that's released it, but this doesn't include information really from commercial flights, from NASA, even from other parts of the American military outside of the Navy. This is just from the Navy itself. So there might be a lot of other stuff out there anyway. But this is just a preliminary report, and the full report has classified information, so we may never see that report. Hopefully we will eventually, but with stuff redacted. But we'll see. So we thought it would be fun to go through this because, Martin, you and I, we both love a UFO, don't we?
Oh, aye.
We even went to an alleged UFO landing site, and that video can also be found on our Patreon. So I thought what we would do is we would just go through this document page by page and have a little chat about it. I think we're both critical about the stuff, but a little bit open-minded as well. The first page essentially just tells you what the scope of the report is going to be, and it says that it's investigating something called a UAP, which is, we tend to use the term UFO, unidentified flying object, but within the military they've been using, I think for a couple of decades maybe, they've been using other acronyms to describe these objects.
It makes sense because within the scope of the way they're looking at it, it might not be an object as such.
Yeah.
Is a reflection an object? Well, kinda, or is something that causes people to see things in the sky an object? Not really. So I guess it keeps it broad enough that it can cover a multitude of different things that are not necessarily objects. Yeah.
So UAP is unidentified aerial phenomena. I should say, I think it's also been verified that although it's not part of this report, I think they do also use the term AAV, which is a little bit more specific, and that's when they were pretty much sure it's a vehicle. That's
autonomous aerial vehicle or something like that.
I think it's anomalous aerial vehicle.
Right.
But that could be a drone. It could be a classified piece of American hardware that they don't want to talk about. It doesn't mean it's little green men, as much as we'd love it if it was little green men. Well, maybe they don't need to be green.
Well, no, you racist.
I know.
That's getting cut out.
I'm against the Greens. Sounds like I'm against the Green Party. So there actually were groups set up within the American military to look at reports that were being given about these UAPs It mentions one of them here. It says to submit an intelligence assessment of the threat posed by unidentified aerial phenomena and the progress the Department of Defense Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, UAPTF, has made in understanding this threat. So there have been people looking at this for some time.
Yeah.
I think in this first page, there's a lot there. We're not going to go through all of that. It just lists the different departments that are involved in this report. However, there is something that it mentions, which is one of the assumptions of the report, which it says various forms of sensors that register UAP generally operate correctly and capture enough real data to allow initial assessments. But some UAP may be attributable to sensor anomalies. So basically, most of the ones that they're talking about, they seem to think the equipment was working correctly.
Because we have seen ones from various arms of the US government where it does appear that it is a sensor fault. Like, for example, the flying pyramid, which...
It's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really an out of focus. I don't know if you actually seen it, Mike. I think we discussed it briefly before.
We did, and then I looked into it afterwards, and I actually got really angry about it because it totally undermines everything that people at Jeremy Corbell have been trying to do, and he released that footage.
Yeah. That's definitely not even a sensor. It's just a feature of a lens when it's out of focus. You get these out of focus highlights, and it happens to have a triangular aperture inside, so you get triangular out of focus highlights. You see it move in front of a star, and the star is also triangular. So every source of light in that image is triangular. So it kind of blew my mind a little bit that a military source would put that forth as evidence of a UAP or as an example of UAP. Now, it's possible that what was being filmed was unknown, and the only footage they had of that was out of focus, and it's just been people that have looked at it. It also
had aircraft lights, though. It had aircraft lights.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that not frustrate you, though, that, you know, Jeremy Corbell, and I really like George Knapp, who's one of probably the main investigative reporter for ufology, I would say, like over the years. He's been involved in a lot of things outside of that, but he broke the Bob Lazar story, and he's been involved in this for many decades, and he was kind of pushing that video as well, and it's like, it's so clearly an artifact of the equipment that's being used.
Yeah. It bugs me. At the same time, you do have to admit it is an unidentified object, but there's nothing about it that hints at any sort of anomalous, any sort of anomalous properties. Certainly not in the video.
Yeah.
There are other videos that do, but that one specifically does make you wonder about the others. It does make you wonder. I mean, I don't know much about the hardware on these jets, for example, that were shooting the Tic Tac. Makes you then wonder what sort of artifacts and what features of the hardware can present unusual objects or the appearance of unusual objects in an image. When they showed footage that was shot on a piece of hardware I was somewhat familiar with, and I could immediately identify what it was with that hardware that was producing that image, it then makes me wonder about the hardware that I'm not familiar with, and the videos that I think are impressive. Is it just that I'm not familiar enough with that hardware to be able to go, actually, that's such and such? Without
getting too conspiratorial about it as well, we know now that I think various memos have been declassified that show that there was at one time an orchestrated attempt by the US military to basically undermine any sort of UFO sighting as just something that was explicable. And we know that disinformation was produced because of that. And there was a valid reason for it. They realised that the communication systems in America, when there was the UFO panic, the communication systems were getting tied up with this. And they could see how the communication systems could actually end up being crippled by it. And it would all it would have taken was the Soviet Union to fake some UFOs. So they decided, right, let's just say that all of this is swamp gas or a weather balloon, not really look into it properly. So there's precedent for...
Are you talking about military communication channels when you say that would be swamped?
Well, I don't know if it was just military communication, because obviously Joe Bloggs doesn't have access to that, but
no,
I think their worry was that the communication systems across the US could get completely overwhelmed by people reporting these things and flying off the handle a bit. And I think that they were worried about social unrest and all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And there have been stories about, maybe the Soviet Union did fake some of the UFO lands. I'm skeptical about that, but some people have argued that point.
It would be par for the course during the Cold War. Even now, between the superpowers, the different kinds of mind games that get played, it wouldn't be...
But there were ones that flew over the White House, though, and I just don't think that they would risk that.
Yeah. That one ties into the Flatwoods monster as well, which is a really interesting case I'd love to do for Talking Till Dawn.
Yeah. But what I mean is that there's been active disinformation that's been put out for kind of valid reasons from a military perspective in the past. All of this stuff, even the stuff that's in this report, does sometimes make me think it may not be... It's a dangerous game for them to play because we're in the age of communication and anything could get leaked that shows that the military are playing with the population. But I do wonder sometimes that some people have said about the pyramidal UFO footage that was taken, that was obviously just from the triangular
bokeh blur
sort
of thing.
Yeah. It's almost like someone playing a prank.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded way for me to say that, Martin.
Yeah. It is interesting. It's, yeah. Why would they do it?
I know. What I'm saying is that I don't take all this stuff at face value. I am personally in a place where I think enough has happened where I can say I think there are probably objects in the sky that we don't understand, but whether they're craft or not, I don't know. But I think that's where I am on it.
Yeah.
But I still don't take everything at face value. There's always that little bit of me that's like, kind of, is this what we think it is?
Yeah. I mean, we know that, for example, the US probably has lots of weird exotic weapons. We know for certain that Russia has developed a host of really bizarre, unconventional nuclear devices. They've got drone submarines that are autonomous and are sailing out in the sea right now with warheads in them and can be sent without... We're not talking about a submarine with sailors on board that's going to launch an ICBM. We're just talking about something that's going to silently sail into a port somewhere and detonate. They've got these kind of really out-of-the-box, bizarre weapons systems.
That puts the fear of God into me, Martin.
It could be sitting halfway up the Clyde, just waiting to go.
Sitting in my bath.
Yeah, the new Jaws. But what I'm saying is that we are in an age where very unconventional devices are being used by militaries. You've got robotic battlefield robots and robotic robots. You get the point. You've got autonomous battlefield robots. You've got drone technology. You've got oceanic technology. You've got a lot of things that it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see some really strange aerial devices coming from Earth governments.
The only thing I would say to that is that unless these things have been put out for disinformation purposes, there is some evidence, I think, that if you were to say that something was a craft, if you were to take that leap, then you would probably have to say this is a technology that's way, way in advance. It's not just something that is like what we have and just a better version of that. It's a completely different line of technology. Now, it's possible that people could have that. It's possible that they could. But I'm not saying that they definitely are craft. I'm saying that if you took the leap to say that some of these are craft, then I think some of the incidents you'd have to then say, well, this is a different type of technology that's currently available. Unless
you combine that with the rider that went before about not only instrument failure, but also instrument misreading, if that makes sense. So, for example, there's one of those Tic Tac videos where it appears there's like a white object. You know the shot where it looks like it's flying over the sea very, very quickly? It looks like it's flying low over the sea at about 600 or 700 miles per hour, and the waves are blasting by behind it. But I watched a kind of breakdown of that video, and the object could in fact be barely moving at all. So you've got, if you imagine, you've got the surface of the ocean, you've got the object is being shot with a very long telephoto lens, essentially, that's trained upon it, and you've got a jet that's moving at many, many hundreds of miles per hour. So the object is not directly over the ocean. It's just that flattening effect of the telephoto lens makes it look like it's close to the surface. If you imagine the object's about halfway between the jet and the ground, and the jet's moving, so the sea is seen to move in the background, almost like, remember in video games you get that parallax scrolling?
Yeah.
It's like that. It makes it look like the sea's moving past much faster because this jet's circling it with a really long lens trained upon the object. So it could well be that the object is only moving about 10 or 20 miles an hour. It could even be something that's drifting in the wind.
Yeah, I know some people say, though, it could be a bird, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The only thing that I do know about that is that I think the likes of David Fravor have said that he thinks all that's kind of unlikely. But
yeah,
to be honest, if we were going to discuss some of these UFO incidents, I would need to go and do more research about it. I don't know enough.
Me too.
I don't know enough to really get into it. It's just more so this report that I find interesting.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, definitely. Let's crack on.
So there's an executive summary in the next section, and I should say that we'll put a link down to this document so you can have a look at it yourselves. And it talks about the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, so UAPTF. They investigated a number of these incidents. So it basically says that there are new processes and procedures that are in place, and they are looking at this in a different and more in-depth way now. But because of that, the stuff that they've released, everything's from 2004 onward.
Yeah.
And the majority of it is like just a couple of years before 2021. Because they claim at least that they've only been looking at that in this way with these new procedures. Yeah,
they've got a specific system, formalized system of reporting that means they tend to be more comparing like with like. They have specific terminology and specific questions that are asked and specific ways of investigating that means that everything gets looked at in the same way. Yeah. So one of the points they say, most of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects, given that a majority of UAP were registered across multiple sensors to include radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapon seekers, and visual observation. So it doesn't mean that with 100% certainty that these things are actually in the air, at least the ones that they're referring to. Yeah. There could be some issue with our technology that no one knows about yet. It's possible, but it seems likely that the incidents that they're talking about, these things were actually, there was something in the air that they were looking at. Yeah. And it also says in a limited number of incidents, UAP reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. These observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperception, and require additional rigorous analysis. So that really does sum up where the problems could be. Yeah, it's quite concise. The next bit where it says there are probably multiple types of UAP requiring different explanations based on the range of appearances and behaviours described in the available reporting. I think that's a key point because there is a bit of a tendency for people to lump all forms of unknown sighting together. And this is what we've always said, like it could be that there are like a small number of these that are unexplained that represent something really genuinely strange and bizarre. And it can also be true that most of them are misidentification or sensor error or that kind of thing. Some might be unknown weather phenomena. Some could be military devices that we don't know about. Like all of the things that we're speculating about could be true all at once. Yeah. You know? Yeah. But they break it down into 5 possible explanations, essentially. These 5 categories are airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, USG, US government or US industry developmental programs, which would mean basically experimental craft, foreign adversary systems, and a catch-all other. Yeah. So just to say that again, airborne clutter, so debris, I think they talk about like, that's when you would talk about like weather balloons and things like that, I think. Yeah. Natural atmospheric phenomena, so ball lightning, which apparently I didn't realise, I thought it was genuinely verified, but there seems to be a bit of debate about ball lightning and whether it's a genuine thing that occurs up in the atmosphere. I thought it was... I've certainly seen videos of it. I've seen... that's the thing, I've seen videos of ball lightning. But I think one of the problems is that they say that it can only exist for a very, very short amount of time, and Did you see the video I posted of Crown Flash on Twitter?
No, I don't think so.
I posted a video on the Talking Till Dawn Twitter, or retweeted it, of a phenomenon known as Crown Flash.
Mhm.
And what it is at the top of a thundercloud, you've got all of these ice crystals floating around, right? But within the thundercloud, there's magnetic forces, electrical forces, and electrostatic forces, and it can actually cause all of these ice crystals that are floating above the cloud to align in the direction of where the source of the lightning is. And when all the crystals point in one direction, they all reflect light in one direction, so you get this weird looking beam or feather of light sticking out of a cloud that then shifts around as if it's like a cat's tail or something. It's really bizarre, and then just disappears out of nowhere, and it 100% looks like some kind of alien skybeam. It's wild. You should check it out.
Definitely will.
Crown Flash, it's called.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's not like ball lightning in the sense that the light produced is not electrical light, it's sunlight, but it's been bent and reflected in a certain way that causes it to look like a solid object twitching around in the sky. It's so strange.
Yeah, so I suppose that's a good example then of things that people aren't widely aware of that are in the sky, and I'm positive there are types of atmospheric phenomena that we don't know about yet.
Sky monsters.
Yeah, sky spitters.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget that. So those are the 5 categories that they've placed most of these incidents into. The report says UAP clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. And they do go on to talk about the number of commercial flights, military flights, and then you've got drones and things like that as well.
Yeah.
That the skies are becoming increasingly cluttered. So they worry that it's only a matter of time before someone runs into one of these.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that there are reported incidents that I've read about where pilots have thought they were going to hit something.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And then it just either got out the way or they were able to evade. So then the report says consistent consolidation of reports from across the federal government, standardised reporting, increased collection and analysis, and a streamlined process for screening all such reports against a broad range of relevant United States government data will allow for a more sophisticated analysis of UAP that is likely to deepen our understanding. So this is what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
This is the beginning. I think a lot of people thought this report was going to be like the smoking gun for aliens.
Yeah.
But no, this is the beginning. This is them saying, we're now going to look at this in a more serious and scientific manner.
Yeah, that's quite exciting, really.
Yeah. I was also listening to, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, but Avi Loeb, the physicist?
Yep. Yeah.
He has a theory about, how do you say it?
Oumuamua.
Oumuamua. He has a theory about Oumuamua, which was an object that entered our solar system a couple of years ago. And there are various reasons why people think that it might be the first documented incident of an interstellar object from another star system that's maybe been expelled from another star system that has entered ours. But he thinks that there's valid reasons to suggest that it might have been artificially constructed. I won't go into that here because I think that's a whole episode in its own, and there are rebuttals to that as well. But he's setting up a legitimate scientific endeavour outside of the military publicly to basically try to capture one of these objects in high fidelity.
A great big net.
But I think that's essentially what he's talking about. It's like using telescopes from all over the world.
Okay, so not a literal net then.
No, right, okay. Fuck you. It's a symbolic net. So this is them basically saying that they're now going to start looking at this in all seriousness. They clearly have been looking at it in the past. They've spent millions of dollars.
Project Blue Book and all of this, yeah.
Well, I mean, just recently, I think in the 2000s they actually had an officially funded program to look at UAPs, but they said that it then shut down, and there's now talk. They thought the program only lasted for a couple of years, but it actually continued on after that, but it just became kind of classified. Yeah. So in big black letters and underlined, available reporting largely inconclusive. This again is why people got so mad when this report came out, because they basically say that there's a limited amount of data to be able to say categorically this thing, this phenomena is this. They're
Yeah.
not able to say that at all. They're saying that's largely down to no standardized reporting mechanism, and this is in the Navy, we have to remember, but one was established in 2019, so that's why most of these incidents come from the last 2 years.
Yeah. The Air Force have adopted it now as well, though, it says.
Yeah. I think they're now basically trying to get all of the military to look at this, which is the way it should be, because you would think this, even if the suggestion is that these things are from other countries or privately funded endeavours, if you're a military, you want to know what these things are and whether they're dangerous.
And also the intelligence service as well, because if they are from other countries, if they are from a foreign adversary of some description, then probably the people to discover that are going to be the people working in the intelligence side of things. Your James Bond is going to be the one that discovers the secret Soviet nuclear weapon, you know.
And spills whiskey all over it.
Yeah.
That's the end of that.
Yep.
So this is where they actually give you some numbers on the reports. So 144 reports originated from US government sources. Of these, and this is mostly in the last 2 years, of these 80 reports involved observation with multiple sensors. So this is the thing, people are disappointed in this report, but I think it's quite staggering what they're saying. You know, that's saying that they had more than one data point to say that there was something there, and more than one way to measure it.
Yeah.
You know, it says most reports described UAP as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity.
And that's interesting as well, because that sets a pattern, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. But I think the data might be skewed because they're essentially watching above military installations more than anywhere else.
Okay, yeah, of course.
So that might be why these things have been reported more so there. They also say that there's a huge stigma with people coming forward talking about these things, and that when they were investigating and asking people about these sorts of things, there were many instances of people claiming to have encountered these objects or these UAPs, and they don't want to come forward because they think they'll get mocked. And also that even if someone does come forward, there were no procedures within the military for an investigation to be carried out. So someone would report it and say, like, I was out there and something came up in the radar and I saw it with my own eyes as well.
Yeah.
And it moved off at lightning speed. What is that? And it's like, well, we've just kind of been told to ignore these things.
Not talk about this.
You know?
Yeah.
Which is...
You're a maniac.
So here it talks a little bit about how the sensor data was gathered, and one of them says sensor vantage points and the numbers of sensors concurrently observing an object play substantial roles in distinguishing UAP from known objects and determining whether a UAP demonstrates breakthrough aerospace capabilities. So that means using technology to measure these things like radar, optical sensors.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to say, well, it's not a fucking plane, or it's not a bird. It says optical sensors have the benefit of providing some insight into relative size, shape and structure. Radio frequency sensors provide more accurate velocity and range information.
And this is the thing as well, like about multiple readings from multiple places and from multiple types of device. So if you're in an aircraft and you train your sensors on an object and it says the object's moving at 700 miles an hour,
yeah,
especially if that information is just then handed to the public without a suitable amount of context as to what it means. So what does that mean to say an object is moving at 700 or 1,000 kilometers per hour? Is that relative speed? Is it airspeed? Is it ground speed? Because it could just be the speed of the jet relative to the object. Mm. It might not be the speed of the object through the air. And if it is the speed of the object through the air, it might be partly the speed at which it's being propelled through the air by high winds. Not that you're going to get 1,000-kilometer winds, but you see what I mean? There's different ways that can be read. And also, due to placement and perspective, there could be sensor misreadings. There can be human error in interpreting that. So having multiple observations from multiple sources is really important, and that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, and it also makes this document more compelling.
Yeah.
And again, I think people genuinely thought that this was just going to come out and say, yeah, there's aliens, and it's still a startling admission as far as I'm concerned. They're saying these things are verifiable in some way.
Yeah.
And all the years that I've read about UFOs, I remember hearing things like that in the last few decades. There have been instances where things have been leaked out, and I know there was instances in Iran and in Mexico, and I think France as well, where they did publicly release certain things to show like Air Force pilots chasing something they didn't really understand, or release the audio from the pilot and the ground control staff talking about this thing. Some of these things have leaked out, but this is the first time that the US military, the most powerful military in the world, is saying, we're finding these things and we don't know what they are.
Yeah. Although, as it says a little bit later on, and it's important to bear in mind that what they're finding and what they're observing probably lack a single explanation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But that within that, that in a way is, I think, what people were hoping. I don't mean to be, an asshole, but I think maybe quite naively people were hoping that they would come forward and say, yeah, there is one specific thing happening here, and there is one specific phenomena that we think we've got a handle on. What they've actually said is there's a lot of shit going on that we don't know about, and some of it is probably quite mundane, and the rest of it we don't really know. That opens up the mystery quite a lot. That does open up a lot of things, and maybe they genuinely just don't know. And I think it would be all very neat and tidy if there was one big monolithic explanation, but this isn't a sci-fi movie. We're not living in a simplified fictional universe. Obviously it's always going to be messy, and there's always going to be uncertainty and things.
Hold on to your pants, Martin, because the next section is headed, and a handful of UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology. In 18 incidents described in 21 reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Now that says observers, so what does that mean? So the next paragraph says, some UAP appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, manoeuvre abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy associated with the UAP sightings.
Interesting.
I think that refers to the fact that some people have said that they've blocked the radar. They've jammed the radar. So I'm assuming that that's what that means.
It could also refer to the idea that these are remotely controlled drones or other devices.
Yeah. The UAPTF holds a small amount of data that appear to show UAP demonstrating acceleration or a degree of signature management. Additional rigorous analysis are necessary by multiple teams or groups of technical experts to determine the nature and validity of these data. We are conducting further analysis to determine if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated. So I think what's interesting about that is, if it was an atmospheric phenomena, I don't think you would really expect it to accelerate. I mean, it's not impossible, but I don't think you would expect it to. But then again, this is saying that this all needs to be verified. It needs to be studied in greater detail. But when they say we are conducting further analysis to determine if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated, and it says they hold a small amount of data that appear to show, I'm assuming this is stuff that isn't publicly available yet.
Yeah, quite possible. I mean, imagine most of it's probably not publicly available yet.
Is there more to come on that? I mean, that also sets up the question of, well, they've publicly stated this, so that sounds like hopefully we'll get a more solidified conclusion about what this is, whether we can say it's not technology.
If it doesn't just get forgotten about and brushed aside, that's,
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like, don't want to get political, but I don't like the guy's politics, but Marco Rubio and other politicians in America now are actually using this as kind of like I think they're almost using it as a way to get voted in.
Yeah.
But they're actually publicly talking about it and saying these things are a threat to national security. We need to know what they are. And I think some of them, there's enough of the population now that want to know about these things that a politician, even if they don't believe in these things,
oh yeah, there's points to be scored.
Can be like, I'll be your champion.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be kept alive in a way that it's never been before.
Yeah.
People from all over the world now are looking at this. I mean, yeah, you've got people in the extremes. You've got debunkers who are going to want to debunk anything that's there. And then you've got true believers who are going to want to believe anything that's there.
Yeah.
But I think there are enough people now in this sort of moderate, open yet critically minded camp that now you've got enough people looking at these things that we are going to discover explanations And some of them might be mundane to us in comparison to what we want to find, but that doesn't really matter. What's important is, what are these things? Looking at the next section then, this is where the report goes into the fact that, as you mentioned, Martin, it's probably not a single explanation for UAPs because they have loads of different characteristics. Some people suggest, and this is highly speculative, that when you get some of these UAPs that have different shapes and things like that this is because there are different races and,
yeah.
So the report goes to look at the 5 categories of explanation. And they do say, with the exception of, there was one instance where they were able to say with high confidence what one of the UAPs was, and that was airborne clutter.
Mm-hmm.
It was a deflating balloon. The rest lack sufficient. That sounds like a joke, isn't it, at the people that feel at deflated balloons when this report came out. We currently lack sufficient information in our data set to attribute incidents to specific explanations, but here are the 5 categories again, and they mention a little bit about them. So like airborne clutter, these objects include birds, balloons, recreational unmanned aerial vehicles like UAV, or airborne debris like plastic bags that muddle a scene and affect an operator's ability to identify true targets such as enemy aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's natural atmospheric phenomena. Natural atmospheric phenomena includes ice crystals, moisture, and thermal fluctuations that may register in some infrared and radar systems. Now that was interesting to me. So if they're saying that some of these things will actually register on infrared and radar, then that makes me become even more cautious.
Well, radar angels are a famous thing, and I think are they not something to do with weather? Are they not related to like weather fronts and stuff?
What I love about doing these laid back discussions is that in our usual episodes we have much more certainty about what we're talking about.
Just vaguely gesturing at things that we've kind of half heard about.
Yeah. So if we appear vaguely intelligent in the main episodes, now people can tell what the truth is.
The curtain has fallen.
I have heard of things like that, but it's interesting to me because it means some of these things that you say, oh well, the radar verified it. It's like, right, well, now you're saying that you can have atmospheric phenomena that shows up on radars.
Yeah, but they wouldn't necessarily, if you have an atmospheric phenomena that's caused by like, I don't know, electrostatic discharge inside a cloud.
Yeah, it's not going to come up as an object.
It's unlikely that there's also a visual element to that. So if there's a visual element that looks like an object, and there's a radar hit that also looks like an object, like that gives both of those a little bit more credibility. Whereas if it's just on instrumentation and not visual, or it's just visual and not on instrumentation, neither one of those is quite as trustworthy as both.
Yeah. So the third category is US government or industry developmental programs. So some UAP observations could be attributable to developments and classified programs by US entities. We were unable to confirm, however, that these systems accounted for any of the UAP reports we collected, but that could just be that the information's been withheld from them about experimental aircraft that people are working with. I mean, I've had thoughts about this. On one hand, it seems really silly for America to use experimental aircraft to confuse their own military, but then on the other hand, it's like, well, if America's got the most advanced technology, maybe that is the best way to test it.
Yeah, I think it's maybe wrong to think of it as a single entity as well. You've got to think of it as like a load of different agencies all looking out for themselves. Ultimately, yeah, they're under the same umbrella, but, it's not even like different departments at work.
Yeah.
If you imagine that, it's like, I don't know, if you think of like different arms of the government that maybe don't even, it's such a huge organization. It's not even a single organization. It's compartmentalized, and people maybe don't go, here I am working for the US government. They're going, here I am working for this one little area of the Air Force or this one research and development lab. So yeah, I don't really think there's probably someone at the head of it all, like coordinating absolutely everything down to the level where they would know about that. Yeah. So yeah, I could see that it could well be things from other arms of the US government, other departments. And
it's also private companies are involved in military development as well. But anyway, so moving on to the fourth category, foreign adversary systems. Some UAP may be technologies deployed by China, Russia, another nation, or a non-governmental entity. I have doubts about this. I don't know if they'd be brazen enough or take the risk of putting something into American airspace like that. I mean, there's always Russia quite often will mess around with NATO airspace, and NATO will mess around with Russian airspace, and likewise with China. But to actually go into American domestic territory, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I don't know. The thing is, as well, again, it comes back to that you're not just dealing with one monolithic organization.
Yeah.
So if there was some agency within Russia that wanted to do that, then
Putin would have to give it the go ahead.
There are proxies that they could use. They could the actual devices themselves might have nothing that traces them back.
Yeah.
You know. But you know, Russia do fly into our airspace quite a lot. They fly into British airspace quite a lot, and
that's what I was saying. They do that with NATO allies,
and I'm sure they do that over Alaska and stuff as well.
Yeah,
which is US home airspace.
Not to be biased as well, by the way, I know for a fact that our military does that as well. They stray into foreign powers' territory, and then they get warned, and then they leave. But it's
send naval flotillas into Chinese waters and things like that.
Exactly. Well, that just happened, didn't it?
Yeah.
So the fifth category is other. Although most of the UAP described in our dataset probably remain unidentified due to limited data or challenges to collection, processing or analysis, we may require additional scientific knowledge to successfully collect on, analyse and characterise some of them. We would group such objects in this category pending scientific advances that allowed us to better understand them. The UAPTF intends to focus additional analysis on the small number of cases where a UAP appeared to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management. So you can read that two ways. We need scientific advances. Does that mean we need new ways of detecting these things? Or does that mean that we need to open our minds up to the fact that these things might be something that's outside of current scientific understanding?
I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
We lack the scientific knowledge to characterize what that is. It may be something that we already understand, but it appears that one explanation could be that it's something we currently lack the ability to characterize. And again, that doesn't necessarily, everyone's rubbing their thighs going, yeah, it means aliens. Maybe, but maybe it means something we know even less about. Maybe it's something like we think about the things we've already imagined, things like aliens or whatever, but there will be things in the universe that we haven't even conceived of. And I mean, that could just be weather phenomena that we don't know about, or it could be
Ghosts.
They could be technologies used by
I just
other
say
nations.
That to get your goat.
There could just be things that we don't even have a comparison for. Something that we just don't know about yet. We don't have a name for what it is.
Yeah.
Something that we don't know about.
Yeah. So the next section then talks about how the program that's been investigating this thinks that these things are flight hazards, and they talk about 11 reports of documented instances in which pilots reported near misses with a UAP. So that's what we sort of touched upon earlier on. And then they also go on to mention that there could be potential national security challenges. They say that they currently lack the data to indicate any UAP are part of a foreign collection program or indicative of a major technological advancement by a potential adversary. But they're monitoring that.
They'd be mad not to.
Yeah. As has been pointed out, if some of these things are craft and they're doing what they're doing from a technological standpoint, then my understanding of it is that it would be a huge leap in technological advancement. I know that it's been talked about that normally using some of the infrared cameras that are on the planes that have taken pictures of these, and on the USS Omaha recently, you can actually tell where a craft is being propelled from.
Yeah.
And that some of these objects appear to have no propulsion but are moving. But that could mean that they're not craft.
It could also mean like the technological advancement might not necessarily be in the mode of propulsion. Technological advancement could be a couple of things. It
Cloaking
could be
devices
in hiding propulsion, or it could be a technological advance in spoofing to sensors that an object is doing something that it's not. Like, not an advancement in making an object zigzag across the sky at 100,000 miles an hour, but simply confusing the sensors to make them think that that's happening.
Yeah.
That would in itself be a huge technological advancement, but it would be a very different one to making the actual device do such a thing.
Did you see the footage from the USS Omaha, the one where it appears to go into the water?
I think so.
If that's legitimate, it's pretty incredible. Because this object seems to move in parallel to the ship and then supposedly splashes into the water. And that is something, we used to read about this, USOs. They would say there's UFOs and there's USOs, unidentified submersed objects.
Yeah.
So this is when the program mentions now taking information from other arms of the American military, but also open it up to commercial air flight as well. Like the FAA apparently have records, Federal Aviation Administration apparently have records about this as well. And I know that there are plenty of pilots, and there's audio that's been released before, pilots that have said that there's something flying alongside them. Recently, there's been the whole jetpack man over in LA, which is probably that's amazing. Probably a video in of itself.
Love it.
You know, commercial pilots do from time to time encounter strange things up there. Doesn't mean that they're aliens, but they do encounter weird things that they can't entirely explain.
Yeah.
The end of the report basically says they're going to now use these new procedures that they've got, and they'll have more agencies looking at this, and hopefully they'll learn more about what these things, and the UAPTF program at the end says that they're looking for more funding to be able to carry out all of these things. But
let me just check my pockets.
So yeah, I think it's a far more interesting document than a lot of people think. It's this really disappointing.
It's funny. I don't think it's disappointing. I think that we could probably have said most of the things that are in it. Like, everything that's in it is already known. But it's nice, and it's just interesting to hear a US agency say that.
Yeah.
You know, there's all this thing like maybe they know more than they really let on, or maybe other departments know more than this department knows. But it's just interesting to see them really take it seriously, and it's, at face value at least, it's encouraging to see them dig into this and admit that there are things that are unknown. And I think partly that's what people think is disappointing, that there's not like a clear-cut answer.
Yeah.
Very rarely are there clear-cut answers to things like this in life. And
that's what makes it exciting, Martin.
If they had come out with a really clear answer, like, oh, they're all this, it's all caused by this, that would be much more suspect than what we've got in front of us. It looks like they are seriously considering this question. They're not just hand-waving it away. Yeah. Which is encouraging.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, I think this report is really interesting. It solidifies the fact that the US government are looking into this. And it also allows us to see that they at least think that some of this might be, and I use that very forcefully, might be technological in basis. Some of it might be.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then whatever the answer is, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I look forward to finding out more. Something I think we'll keep an eye on as time goes on.
And I now have to cook my daughter dinner. We end on that.
Yum.
So please do let us know what you think about this document. Like I say, there's a link in the show notes below. And if you are listening to this on anywhere but Patreon, please do consider supporting the show. It really helps keep the lights on and will help us make more episodes. And a big thank you to everyone who's supported us already.
We'll have a new episode out, I think, probably towards the end of this month. I'm not sure what that's going to be about yet, but keep your eyes peeled for that too, because it will be coming down the pipeline soon.
Keep watching the skies. No?